Hi and welcome. I'm Annette Oltmans, founder and CEO of the Men Project. In this upcoming workshop titled Lying in Relationships and How It Can Be a Tactic of Control, we're going to look at how lying is intentionally used in relationships to exert power and control over the other person. We're going to cover examples of what lying in abusive relationships looks like and why abusers use lying or various forms of lying. We're going to take a deeper look into specific deceptive tactics and the emotional impact that it has on the one being harmed. We're going to wrap up with ideas for how to respond. So join us as we take on the topic of lying and deception to help you gain deeper clarity to propel you on your journey today. Okay, so let's get started. The topic of lying as a form of control in relationships is a big one. And so my hope for you today is to bring you clarity and offer tools for understanding so that you can protect yourself as best as possible. You know, people lie for different reasons. And sometimes people are so habitual in their lying that they're not even aware of it. But we want to look today at the impact that lying has on you. No matter what their reason is for lying, there's really no excuse, whether it's habitual, a characterological problem, or that they just don't value honesty. The impact that it has on you and your relationship is devastating. So it's not so much about harmless fibs, it's about chronic strategic deception. Let me just explain that a little bit. If somebody tells you a lie that is a black and white lie, or if somebody omits telling you the entire truth, those are two different types of lies, but they both are based in deception. And I love this book by Scott Peck. Scott Peck is, he's no longer with us, but he was a psychiatrist who wrote The Road Less Traveled and People of the Lie. And in People of the Lie, he said it's actually easier to overcome a bold, black and white lie than it is 100 little white lies, because the little white lies over time change people's perception of you. So if somebody is telling a lot of white lies about you over time, that's much harder to persuade them to believe differently about you when it's happened over and over and over again over a period of time. And he calls that purely evil. So we're not minimizing white lies, and we're not only focusing on black and white bold lies. We're talking about both. So I want to emphasize that these tactics are not uncommon depending on the type of narcissist or abuser that you're dealing with, whether it's a boss at work or your partner in life. Lies are a part of many people's lives. They don't value the importance of not lying. They've grown comfortable lying. And once you lie once, it's easier to lie the second and third and fourth time. And sometimes it just really becomes habitual, and it has a very negative impact regardless of its motive. So I want to identify that lies can cause confusion. They can cause mistrust in the relationship. I mean, really, if you don't have an honest relationship, then you don't have emotional safety. And when you don't have emotional safety, but maybe you haven't quite put together that it's due to chronic lying or omissions, it's disorienting. You tend to lose your sense of self. You tend to lose your sense of what an accurate narrative is about your circumstances. It's not always about the intent behind the motive behind the person lying. It's the impact it has on you. There are plenty of covert, emotionally abusive individuals who will say things to garner support for themselves because they're driven by image management. And let me just back up and tell you a little bit. I'm going to actually show you something. On our website, on our tools and resources page, we talk about the 4 pillars of abuse. And it's the 4 belief systems or mindsets that drive an abuser's thought process. The first one is a sense of entitlement. So they believe that they're deserving of double standards that you're not deserving of. So they put themselves in a hierarchical position. Another one is faulty belief system or systems, where it could be an ethnic belief system or cultural belief system, or it could be something like patriarchy, where men believe they're in a hierarchical position than women. And so that puts you in a downgraded position if you're a female. But one of the pillars of abuse is called image management. And that's what I'm talking about now, where they care so much about what other people, the abuser cares so much about what other people think of them, that they will make disparaging marks against you to elevate themselves. So that might look something like, pray for my wife because she's having a real hard time with mental illness. Things like that. Over time, persuade people. And so lying can take on these different styles. Now, I'd love to get a pulse on what you understand about lying. If you've noticed different forms of lying being employed against you, or have lies left you feeling confused about what actually occurred, confused about what the narrative actually is, or have you been able to quickly identify it for what it is? And there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to get a pulse on what your perspective is about lying. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to write in the chat what you understand about lying, maybe what your experience with lying has been, and if you've noticed it causes you confusion or self-doubt, or what you've noticed about it. And then Chandra, if you could read me any comments as they come in.
Yeah, we have a couple here. One person says, to crush my self-esteem, make me confused, and create self-doubt.
Yes, very good. Those are very common results. That demonstrates the impact of lying. It causes self-doubt.
Yeah,
You doubt yourself more than you doubt the other person. It's very effective, lying is.
Yeah, I think my ex has covert narcissist tendencies, and I lost my sense of self and safety through dissociation.
Mm.
We have
you sometimes have to, your body dissociates because it's so stressful in the moment. It's so traumatizing to have somebody completely rewrite history that you almost have to emotionally remove yourself from those circumstances to cope. Any more, Chandra?
Yeah, a couple more here. One comment saying, thank you, Annette. You are speaking to exactly what I went through. Everything you have said so far is right on the money.
I'm sorry that you've gone through this, but it's so good to learn to really understand it so it can't have the same impact on you in the future.
Yeah, we've got several more here. It took many years to see the deception because he's incredibly intelligent. It's so covert, but then truths become evident, and his affair was where I finally woke up. How painful.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Not sure if this is lying or gaslighting. Oh, sorry, it went away. Husband would say the same thing, pray for her, she's mentally ill, or he would deny knowing where something is, for example, car keys, and I saw him place the keys on a table when he thought I was not looking.
Well, gaslighting is something we're going to talk about today. It is a form of lying, and other tactics. They're very slippery. So much deception, so covert, like you said, and very creative. So we'll get into some of that. Any other comments, Chandra?
Yeah, there's quite a few more here.
Okay, let's do like 3 more.
Okay, yeah, people have a lot to say. It's
Good.
disorienting. Is this the truth? It doesn't feel like it, but I trust this person, so it has to be the truth, but it isn't, which is the point. Sending messages to other women, songs that he would send to me saying they were my song, and then immediately send the songs to his ex or coworker, then saying it was no big deal. They're just friends.
Yeah, crazy making.
Yeah,
Both of these
several.
last comments just
Yes.
demonstrates the crazy making feelings that it causes.
Okay. Let me see here. There's several more. Let's see. Here's just a thank you one. Annette, you're the only person who has helped me through the trauma of my covert narcissistic breakup.
Oh, well, there's a lot of resources out there. Thank you for the affirmation. But there are other resources that if you want to email us, we can direct you to some so that you can get plugged in to some back-end services and emotional support, like group support, things like that. So let me move on. So you're all talking about how disorienting it is. And just think about how effective that is to the abuser or the offender, however you want to frame that person, will say and do just about anything to avoid accountability and responsibility. You, on the other hand, are willing to accept responsibility. So you adopt their narrative because it's hard to believe that somebody will sit right in front of you and tell you a lie. It's unnatural because that's not something that you would do. You value honesty. You place it on a pedestal because you know that you can't have a safe relationship if there's not meaningful trust and integrity. So you're both operating from very different worldviews, which is one of the most important things to grasp when you are in an abusive relationship, that you're dealing with someone who has they're operating from an entirely different playbook. It doesn't match up with yours at all. And the two are oftentimes unaware of the other person's playbook. So you are trusting someone to be treating you and thinking about you the way you think about them, but that's just not what's happening. They have a very different set of motives and objectives that they're trying to achieve that have nothing to do with the motives and objectives that you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve emotional connection, emotional safety, deepening of the relationship. They're wanting to win arguments, to power over you, to control the narrative. So those are very incompatible differences. Chronic lying shows up in subtle and overt ways, such as denial of actions. They might say something like, I didn't do that. You're imagining things. They just outright denial invalidates your lived experience. Or it might be a different kind of denial. They're so habitual, they just it's their go-to position to lie or to omit information. And denial, the acronym for denial is don't even know I'm a liar. And I think that's very impactful. They're so habitual that they lose track that they are being extremely destructive to the relationship, that their character quality is seriously flawed and bankrupt, actually. And they don't look in the mirror and they don't have an inner critic where they're really evaluating their behavior. They just act that way and brush it under the table. So in many of those cases, it turns into what I've said is habitual or pathological lying. No excuses to take them off the hook. It's highlighting what is a deep characterological flaw. I just want to say, let me rephrase that. There's no excuses. So often victims of narcissists are empathic. They, like I said, they're seeking a deeper emotional connection, emotional safety. They have a heart for the relationship. They care about the well-being of the other person. They're willing to accept responsibility when they make mistakes. And so they're willing to give excuses, make up excuses for the covert abuser rather than looking accurately at the situation. And now part of that has to do with how disorienting it is. You have this level of cognitive dissonance where you're actually gaslighting yourself because you don't see accurately their entirely different worldview and all that goes behind their lies. You are trusting and wanting to believe the best in them. So there's a cognitive dissonance about what is actually happening and what your perception of what's happening is. And so I don't want you to give any excuses to them. I want you to look at this as accurately as possible. Their lies, whether they're omissions, denial, or bold-faced lies, are highlighting what is a deep characterological flaw that originates from not being willing or capable of self-reflection. They don't have an inner critic. They have an outer critic. They're criticizing you and people around them, but they're not willing to be vulnerable and look in the mirror and say, oh, I should not do that. I need to take responsibility and apologize. I need to stop that behavior. They don't have that inner critic. They are above criticism. They are in a position of wanting to power over and control the narrative. They don't have that same need or desire to emotionally connect. Oh, sure, they love adoration. They love to be loved on, but they don't want to reciprocate that. They don't want to truly meet you where you are in a safe relationship. So unfortunately, pathological liars are very convincing because we've mentioned already once, people generally don't suspect that somebody they know well is capable of lying straight to their face. And it's a hard one to swallow that somebody is lying, especially when you're not a liar. It's hard. And a lot of therapists miss this. Let's say you go to therapy with your narcissistic partner. They will use, very common in couples therapy, they will use false accusations to mischaracterize the survivor and throw a thread of truth into a narrative, but distort the entire thing so that the therapist is judging wrongly the survivor rather than seeing the pattern of false accusations coming from the offender. I hope that makes sense. So it just creates so much confusion and a lack of support by others on the outside because they've been so persuaded by someone that they too didn't believe would lie right to their face. So if you get gaslit, let's say they're gaslighting you, they'll say, that's not how it happened. You're too sensitive. So you're getting harmed twice. First, they're telling you the narrative is not what you think it is. And then they blame you further and say, you're too sensitive. So you're getting it twice. And it can be very powerful to disorient you and to cause you so much self-doubt. It wants to cause self-doubt. They want to cause you confusion and self-doubt about your memory, about your instincts, and about your emotions. Now, remember, I didn't talk about it. The last pillar that I didn't mention was a low emotional IQ. So these are the things that drive an abusive mindset. I said entitlement, a faulty belief system, image management, where they really care about what other people think, so they create a false narrative, and then a low emotional IQ. So they really don't have the capacity to embrace your emotions or even understand their own emotions. They want to stonewall emotions. They want to keep you at a distance and shut you down. They want to win arguments. They have a very different motive. You want an argument to lead, conflict resolution, to lead to deeper intimacy and respect and care, which is healthy. They don't have that healthy mindset. So you become deeply confused, and confusion causes high stress. So if confusion equals stress, and that can lead to PTSD, then your answer is to gain clarity. So I want you to go to our website on the tools and resources page. It doesn't look like this, but it's just to show you that we have a lot of terms and definitions that describe different behaviors. And one thing that I really want you to notice about these terms and definitions is that you can apply lying to literally every single one of these. Like another one would be deflection. You can apply deflection, even though it's one term, you can apply it to many of these terms. So there's a crossover, which makes it even more confusing. But the more familiar you become with these terms and definitions, the more easily you are going to see crystal clear what is happening. And that's what you need to overcome confusion and stress, is that clarity that really gives you the command of knowing what's happening. And that's what I want for you. So spend some time with the terms and definitions. Confusion also often leads to self-blame. You who are survivors are mostly empathic, like I said. You have an inner critic. You're willing to self-examine and take responsibility for your mistakes. But the problem is that because you're empathic, survivors are usually willing to take on more responsibility, to assume more responsibility than what is rightfully theirs. And so that's not going to cause the abuser to say, oh, no, that's not you're not responsible for that. They're going to say, yeah, you're responsible for that. So the more you accept responsibility for, the more they're going to hold you responsible for it. And so it's really important that you become your own best advocate and don't take responsibility for things that are not yours, that you place it directly where it belongs, at their feet. If they're responsible for it, they need to be held accountable for it. You're very willing to be guilty, whereas the offender will say and do anything to avoid being guilty, to avoid accountability or responsibility. Okay, now I want to move into withholding the truth. And we've talked about it a little bit through omissions. They might say something like, you don't need to know that. I was going to tell you later. Or I was trying to protect you from worrying. And this happens often when somebody is financially irresponsible. They will run up debt and not tell you. And it's devastating to suddenly find out that you're responsible for all this debt that you knew nothing about. And they excuse it away by saying that they were trying to protect you and didn't want to worry you. That is so manipulative. Keeping you in the dark maintains their control over the narrative and over the situation. It allows them to control the finances. They don't have the same values you do. You don't believe in debt. They don't care about debt. You don't believe in lying. They don't care about lying. These are deep character flaws. And manipulation is a character flaw. So like to hide their financial misdeeds as they try to make you feel like they were protecting you is so manipulative and very confusing. And it's not going to leave you feeling good. You're going to feel violated and betrayed and so confused. And it's going to be a hard reality that you face what you're actually dealing with and the impact that it's having on you. And I want you to go through that radical acceptance where you realize, oh my gosh, I have to look at this through an entirely different lens than what I've been looking at it before. Okay, I want to move into twisting reality. They might say something like, you always get things wrong. You're the problem. So that's a complete distortion of reality. It turns the attention away from their behavior and it places blame on you. Or they'll say, I can't tell you the truth because you always overreact. Many offenders are irresponsible with finances or regarding specific values that are important to you. So to hide their character flaws, they blame you for being overreactive. Don't let that throw you off. You don't have to adopt that narrative. You don't have to agree with it. You can stand up and say, I don't share your perspective. You're being deceptive. I see it clearly for what it is. And I don't agree with your narrative. You can say that firmly. Lying is used to dominate perception, to control the narrative. So that's why they use it so much in white lies and in bold lies. Why abusers use lying and deception. I want to talk a little bit. Lying is not random. There are patterns and motives behind it. Number one, they want to avoid accountability. Abusers lie to cover their actions or deflect blame and escape consequences or minimize consequences. They don't want to face consequences, so they'll say whatever to justify their behavior so that you don't really hold them accountable or that other people don't hold them accountable. It's a way to escape having to face the music. So each of these motives is highly destructive to a relationship. All of these thought processes are undermining emotional safety. Without emotional safety, you can't have trust in a relationship. Without trust, you can't have safety. It goes back and forth. You can't build a relationship that doesn't have a strong foundation of honesty. Offenders lie to avoid having to honor your reasonable boundaries. They counter your preferences. So countering is another one of the terms on this list where you might say, honey, I need you to put the baby in the car seat this way for he or she to be safe. And they'll say, oh, sure. But when it comes time to putting them in the car seat, the next time they do it their way, they don't care. That's called countering. Or if you say, I have a preference, it might be physical intimacy. You have a preference. They're going to do the opposite rather than accommodate you because they want to control the narrative and they don't want to submit to your preferences. They want to control them. It's very dark and twisted, but this is the way that they think. They want to win. They want to power over you. They don't want to lean into how you think and feel. They're emotionally immature. They're emotionally manipulative. Their characters and values are not thought about or cared about. They don't really value character. They don't value your values. They might not even be aware of values, and they're certainly not teaching their children values. That's left up to you. So their character and values are most likely rooted in self-protection, defensiveness, and doing and saying whatever will win arguments. They want to win while you're seeking meaningful emotional safety and connection. They want to create confusion. Chaos keeps you second guessing yourself and dependent on their version of events. So I want to highlight that again. Until you really figure out how you are being played by an entirely different playbook, you almost become dependent on their version of events because of all the self-doubt that has been developed in you and been groomed in you. So, and because you are so trusting and unsuspecting, you become dependent on their version of events. And that really undermines you because they're not trustworthy. So we don't want to become dependent on them. But that's what this push and pull is, where then this trauma bond develops because you're so dependent on their narrative. You seek to be soothed by the very person who is harming you. And if you look at that objectively, a person who is perpetually harming you is not someone that we should seek soothing from. We need to look at it more accurately and say, this person isn't safe. I'm going to get soothed by my girlfriends, my family members, or someone else in your life. not somebody who's emotionally unsafe and destructive. They need to control the narrative, how you and how others view them and the relationship. And they will work hard at doing that, even scapegoating you and falsifying information about you. Like I said, asking people to pray for you because you have a mental illness. There's so many other ways they can undermine you. You don't want to eat my wife's cooking. It could be as benign as that, implying that you're not a good cook, even though maybe you are. And just things to tear you down, to make it seem like you don't try hard in the relationship, or you're not grounded, you're off kilter. So it basically is like a smear campaign about your character to mutual contacts to elevate their character, which is following through on that one pillar of abuse, image management. Keeping you disoriented means you're less likely to stand up for yourself. And lying is one of the most aggressive, controlling behaviors, often overlooked as subtle, but it is aggressive. Lying by omission, that could be leaving out details, which can be just as manipulative as a blatant lie. Leaving out details can lead you to believe that you have the full picture when you don't have the full picture at all. So it's very disorienting. And then when you learn the full truth, it's very shocking and traumatic. And nobody wants to go through that. Author and psychiatrist Scott Peck, who I talked about before, makes these suggestions that omissions, I mentioned white lies before, but omissions, which involve a distortion of the truth, can be more challenging to address and overcome than a bold-faced lie. So omissions and white lies. So remember that. Vagueness and deflection, answering questions with non-answers. I don't remember. That's not important. Oh, did I promise you that? I have no recollection of that. Or they might flip it all around and turn it into a false accusation against you, which really throws you off kilter. Now they take that shred of truth, like I mentioned before, and they weave it into their lie. And it becomes very difficult for you sitting on the hot seat to defend yourself when there's a shred of truth to something, like maybe you left the restaurant because they were being really inappropriate and unkind. So you got up and you left. And then they tell the therapist that you caused a big scene and left the restaurant, omitting entirely what led up to that. And so you're all of a sudden on the hot seat trying to explain yourself because of the way it was presented. And it takes a lot of energy. And next thing you know, 40 minutes has gone by and your whole session is over and you never got to address what led up to you leaving the restaurant in the first place. That's getting stuck in the minutia. Their lies control the minutia. And if you get stuck in that, instead of stepping back and looking at the patterns of behavior, then you're going to be stuck defending yourself against something you shouldn't have to defend yourself for. So I want you to always look for the patterns of behavior and stay out of the minutia. And so in that case, I would say, speak to the therapist and say, this is another false accusation. There were false accusations last week, and you're not picking up on the pattern of false accusations. I'm not going to get into the minutia and defend myself when it's not addressing the real issue, which is false accusations. That's an example of how to stay focused on the pattern. They will make false promises. I'll change. This won't happen again. And that's just used to buy time and avoid consequences and maintain their power and control, to maintain that they don't have to face consequences. And you might be naive enough to believe them, so you give them another chance. Or they're involved in triangulation, bringing others into the lie to isolate or discredit you. It's very difficult to overcome because it's hard to describe manipulative actions. That's another reason why I love the terms and definitions. It gives you the proper language to describe manipulative behavior. So you can advocate for yourself with a therapist, with a family member, with a friend, with your pastor, whatever. You have the language. In your own mind, you can advocate for yourself. It'll set you straight and remove the confusion, because now you have the proper language to really be able to name what's happening. So all these tactics that I've mentioned serve to dismantle your sense of safety and clarity, and you start to feel like you're the one going crazy, or in fact are crazy. And so the emotional impact of that is emotional distress. It leads to anxiety and hypervigilance and emotional exhaustion. You overfunction. You're working hard to try to solve the problems when you should be working less and disengaging and saying, this person isn't safe. So I'm not going to bring my heart to that person. I am not going to believe them, and I'm not going to bring my heart to them. I'm going to start disengaging. That's a much more productive way to be interfacing with somebody who's not safe. Survivors often describe being in a fog or in a loop of ruminating. So you're playing the situation over and over again to try to make sense of it, but it doesn't make sense. And rumination, for those that don't know, it just simply means you're replaying an argument or discussion repeatedly until you can make sense of what really happened. Sometimes you have to go back and look at a journal to determine what really happened. You are so disoriented that you're trying to sort it all out, and it might take you a week or 2 weeks to even remember what started an argument in the first place. It's so crazy making. It causes an erosion of self-trust. It causes a loss of your autonomy. It causes you to not trust yourself. But what I want you to do is, let me see the time. Okay. What I want you to do is validate your own perceptions and feelings and what you experienced as being real. You need to be your own best advocate. You don't need that other person's approval. They're distorted anyways. So why would we go to them to soothe us when they're not safe? We have to get that radical acceptance to look at things more accurately. I want you to learn to document the truth. So write down what happened. If an argument was crazy making, just go to your journal and just write down, okay, I said this, they said that, and it will be clear to you. And it will document that you know really what happened. So later when they say, I never said that, you have it in writing. You don't have to write a long, detailed list. I don't want you to stress yourself out by doing that, but just bullet points and date it so that you have an accurate narrative of what took place. And then you start to look at your journal to strengthen your perspective so that you're not being worn down and filled with self-doubt. I want you to learn how to set boundaries where you refuse to engage in circular conversations. You simply say, I don't like where this conversation's going. You're not telling the truth, so I'm going to exit right here and right now. And you walk away. You set that boundary. You're not going to participate in circular conversations. You detach from the need to prove your truth. So often victims will work so hard because they're going to say, no, this is what happened. And they overfunction and they try every way to reach their partner and to change the dynamics. It's a waste of time. I'm not saying that saving your marriage is a waste of time. I'm not here to judge that. That's a very personal choice, but you would never save your marriage anyways, trying to prove to them that you were right. They don't care. They're lying. They're not going to admit that. They have no interest in it. So I want you to start protecting your heart. Guard your heart, like the Bible says, and look at things accurately. Don't look at things emotionally or in this fantasy wish list that you hope for your relationship. Look at things accurately. Stay calm. Emotional regulation prevents you from being blamed for your reaction. So I don't want you to have an outburst Now, it's perfectly explainable that there is going to be reactions with PTSD, but the more you can do therapeutic work on yourself and really disengage and look at things accurately, the more you can calm your nervous system and the more you can control your responses so that you're responding rather than reacting. I don't want you to get blamed for your reactions. So you might have every reason in the world to slap them across the face or to blurt out obscenities and do whatever. I just don't want you to do that, though, because they're just going to use that against you. And then you're in an even weaker position. And you're going to feel guilty for what you said or did. So I want you to really work with a therapist or in reading trauma books, going through our course to learn ways to control, to garner more self-control, more peace of mind, more confidence in your perspective. Sometimes you need external validation to see the truth clearly. So I would love for you to have someone you can confide in, a safe person, a knowledgeable person, somebody who's emotionally mature to be able to walk alongside you. I want you to be able to protect your emotional safety, which means just as much as physical safety. It's so important for your mental health. I want you to make a plan if deception is part of the broader pattern of abuse. Make a plan to become more autonomous, more aware of your finances, and more involved in day-to-day details. Refuse to be held in the dark. Create a plan to emotionally detach from the offender. It's not wise to aim for emotional connection with someone who is clearly unsafe and untrustworthy. So start acting more accurately to your circumstances. Look at things through self-empowerment. Give yourself more power. Understand that these tactics that are being employed against you, you can validate, you can separate yourself, you can speak the truth, validate yourself, and reclaim your voice and your story. You can write your own narrative. You can recognize manipulation and see things accurately. That helps you take action steps to protect your mind, body, and your heart. And you can relearn to trust yourself. And actually, it's a crucial step towards recovery. You are lovable. You deserve to experience safety and trust and healthy love. It's not your fault, no matter what the offender says. So we believe that clarity of the issues is power, and that survivors can learn to write and rewrite their story with truth and courage. So I'm just going to close with this and then take your questions. Lying is not just deceit. It can be a form of power, control, and abuse. You are not the problem. You can begin your story again. If you haven't yet, consider the MEN Project's Finding Clarity and Healing in Difficult, Confusing, or Abusive Relations. It's an online course that I highly recommend for you. It will jumpstart your healing journey. It will help you not be so reactive. You will feel so much clarity. And so many graduates have said that it saved them about a year or two of therapy. So I really encourage you to take it. It will help you identify patterns and the nuances of your relationship. It'll help you rebuild trust in yourself and to take clear action steps forward. Okay, so now, thank you for listening. I would love your questions.
Yeah, we have a lot of statements, a couple questions here. One person says, I recently learned to say a statement that I can stop the narcissist in his tracks. I used it the other day and it was very effective. I am not having this conversation.
I love that. I think that's absolutely excellent. It means you're not getting in the minutia, but you're saying, I am not going there. Good for you.
I heard someone mention that ruminating is a sign of not having closure.
Well, that makes sense. It's not having closure, not having clarity. So you're playing it over and over in your mind, trying to make sense of what happened. But once you really get a good command of the terms and definitions, and you can, another reason to look at your journal and to really understand these terms and definitions is so that you are no longer blindsided when somebody employs these tactics against you. You can say, that's blame shifting, I'm not going to engage. Or that's minimization, I'm not going to engage. So you say, no, I'm not having this conversation. You're minimizing me, and I'm not going down this road. So you have clarity. You are, you don't need to ruminate because you know what it is. But when you don't figure out what it is, victims and survivors are stuck in these prolonged states of stressful confusion for years, even decades at a time, not knowing the source of their relationship problems. So that's when ruminating comes in. You're really trying to square it all up and make sense of it. But once you understand what you're dealing with and you understand the behaviors that your abusive person tends to use against you, that blindsides you, that throws you off track, once you can anticipate those, then you don't need to ruminate about them anymore. You'll be able to say, oh, that was that. And that's the end of it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, very good. Someone says, I like this statement. Does all of you believe that?
That's pretty clever. Yeah, that's funny. Does all of you believe that? That's good.
We've had a couple comments saying journaling is so necessary. Your daily journal entries are what will keep you sane.
I love journaling is essential when you're coming to terms with your circumstances, because I mean, let's face it, you've probably been stuck in confusion for years, not understanding the source of the problem. And so journaling is very helpful to overcome that. But hopefully you get to a place where you don't need to journal anymore, because you don't need to prove it to yourself. You don't need to prove it to other people. You know what it is, and you can take yourself off the hook. But until you are there, while you're learning, while you're empowering yourself, while you still have self-doubt, journaling is a very useful tool that I highly recommend. But ultimately, you're going to overcome the need to do that, because you are going to become so strong and triumphant that you don't need to justify. You are confident in your perspective. You don't need to justify yourself to anyone. You don't need to read it from somewhere. You are confident. You know the truth. That's the goal. Wouldn't that feel wonderful? And I promise you, thousands of victims have gone before you, and they attain that, and you can attain that too.
That's so beautiful and hopeful. Someone asks the question, how can the survivor be seen correctly in light of the tactics the other has used against them?
Well, it's not easy. And so what often happens, and it's very sad and traumatic, and this occurred in my life as well, is I had to just let go of a lot of friends because the chatter was so critical, and I couldn't tolerate it anymore. I needed to get my sanity and not have to justify myself to people. So I had to make a difficult decision of walking away from quite a few relationships. And it wasn't easy. It felt very lonely. I felt abandoned. I felt mischaracterized. And because I had such a low sense of self-worth, feeling mischaracterized made it even worse. But I realized a few months later that stepping away from people who are chattering noise that is harmful to me, stepping away from that was the best thing that ever happened. I say that I feel God removed me out of some relationships that, although it was very painful and isolating, I feel like it was he did a huge favor to remove me from people that are judgmental in the wrong ways. If they're not, it's very difficult to convince people to change their thinking. And they can think what they want. They're adults. So if they want to have distorted beliefs about you, faulty beliefs, they're entitled to. It doesn't make it comfortable for you, but you're not going to please everyone on this earth. Not everyone's going to love you. And even people that you thought loved you might change their mind based on the slander campaign that your abuser had. And it's just better to walk away than to try to convince them. They're so set in their ways and they so want to believe they're right. They're not likely to change their thought process. They're, at the best, they're going to say, well, I don't want to choose sides, so I'm going to play neutral. And neutrality benefits only the abuser. It harms the victim. So I just say remove yourself and work on meeting new friends. Join an exercise class where the endorphins are helping your stress and where meeting new people, even just small superficial conversations, can bring so much positivity to your life. And you don't need to be in deep conversations. You just need to have lighthearted, fun, endorphin producing experiences. You need to get outside, get your feet in the grass, or take a walk along the shoreline. You need to have creative outlets where you can let your mind escape. And, whether it's embroidery, crocheting, painting, glass blowing, I don't care what it is, anything creative is going to be really helpful for your psyche. Physical activity is really helpful. So I say get proactive about stretching yourself in new areas and let some of that old stuff go, as painful as it is. You will find wonderful people. You will find activities that make you feel good about yourself. If you are willing to sometimes the biggest battle is put your tennis shoes on and go outside. Sometimes the hardest part is deciding to put your tennis shoes on. But once you get outside and you go for a walk, you've done that and you feel good about it. So start, you could join a hiking club. You could join a walking club. There's so many things that you can join where you see the same people week after week and you develop new relationships. And I highly recommend that you do that. You might even need to change your church and go somewhere where you have new faces and where they're not invested in your ex or the person that's harming you, that you can control the narrative better. Not that you want to be controlling, but maintain the accurate narrative. So I would much rather see you do those sorts of things. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, we have two. They're very different, but I want to get them both in here. A friend I have known for over 10 years asked me to explain again my situation with my husband, protective order, etc. She is, quotes, having a hard time knowing what and who to trust, end quote. I want to minimize my contact with her, but not ghost her. Suggestions for a script to say or text.
I would probably text, so it's in writing, and say, this is just coming at, I'm sure I'll think of something better later, but for right now, I would say something like, I understand this is really complicated. And rather than put you in a position of having to discern who's telling the truth, I would rather just give you the freedom. I'm going to step back because I know that I am telling the truth. And I'm taking a step back because I don't have the energy to justify my circumstances, to explain them. Either you love and you trust me and you know I've never been a liar, or you're going to have a lot of self-doubt. And I love you, but I can't manage your self-doubt and manage my own feelings right now. Something like that. Just put it out there.
Very good, thank you. And now this question here says, I have talked of this previously. I get why you're not supposed to tell your children. Mine are 16 and twins 12. I feel it's wrong to not tell them, also, as I see them in therapy in their future, questioning why I never told them what has been done to them.
Well, if it's been done to them, I'm going to say that, okay, if your child is wanting to talk about it or is willing to talk about it, then I think if you use very clear strategies like the terms and definitions, that's very tangible. We know that it's the proper language. You're not confusing them. You're giving them clarity. We also have on our tools and resources something called the maze of confusion. It diagrams what it's like to be in a crazy making conversation. It's a metaphor. The maze is a metaphor for a conversation. And so a healthy person operates on the gold line. It's mutual listening, mutual respect, mutual desire to want to understand each other's perspective. And then you move through to solutions. There's only one entrance and one exit. But when you're dealing with a covert narcissist, you're just dealing with one dead end after another, blame shifting, lying, countering, catastrophizing, minimization, all these things being thrown at you in one conversation that you don't know what's up or down anymore. So if they have been experiencing some of this, then I think it's humane to, if they're willing to learn some of these things without disparaging the other parent, because you'll lose all credibility. You have to be careful to say, things like, this, I want to show you what healthy communication is and what unhealthy communication is. And you don't put your ex's name in the mix. You just talk about communication styles and you show what is healthy for a learning experience for them. And then you can say, unfortunately, your father hasn't learned these things and he doesn't practice these things. And that's why I'm not saying he's all bad. I'm saying this is a broken part and it unfortunately has a big impact on how it affects people around him. And I just want you to be aware of that so you can learn how healthy communication is supposed to look and how you can learn to interact with him in a way where you don't lose yourself in the relationship, where you don't feel beaten down, where you can hold your ground and hold your sense of self and hold your autonomy, something like that. But if they don't want to talk about it and go, oh, mom, whatever, I would rather you just focus on showing up really well for them, be that parent that's really interested in all of their goings on, in their grades, in their friends, showing such an interest, maybe take each child out for lunch or dinner, once every couple of weeks so you have alone time to show that you're really interested in them. You will be showing up differently than their other parent is, and they will see that you are the safe parent, that you really are there for them, that you're someone they can trust. So that tends, if they don't want to talk about it, that is one way that you can really influence what health and model what healthy is so that they feel safe with you. I hope that makes sense the way I said it.
I want to read this comment because I think it's exactly what you're talking about. It says, I would say the best defense against these tactics is to simply not take the bait, but to know your value and just walk away. this can be a very hard thing to do.
It can be a hard thing to do, especially if you are still trying to win over their approval of you. But once you realize that is futile and that you need to approve yourself, that you are the person in charge of your life, it's so freeing to let it go and to just not engage. It is so empowering. And I can say now, years later, things that used to trigger me so much, and I would just have such a strong reaction because how violating it felt. Now I can almost laugh at the situation because it doesn't affect me. I don't need a crazy maker to give me approval. I don't really care. Go ahead and gossip about me. I don't really care what other people think either. I mean, everyone wants to be liked, but I'm saying, I'm not struggling to try to win over approval and to have somebody align with my thinking. Let that go. It's the best thing that you'll ever do in your life is to let that go. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, that's all the questions. We have some comments. God bless. Thank you. Thank you, Annette.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, speaking right to my situation. So you have answered all the questions.
Okay, very well. Well, the one thing I want to leave you with is to take really good care of yourself because that's really up to you. No one is going to take better care of you than you are of yourself. Okay, so until next time, bye-bye.